Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Jason Marlowe moved into his dream home deep in the mountains, he expected peace. What he got instead was a ruthless HOA president, forged documents, and a war for his land. What began with a knock at the door would spiral into FBI raids, viral videos, and one epic fight for freedom. I'd just finished lugging the last moving box out of my truck when I heard the crunch of gravel behind me. At first, I figured it was a delivery van or maybe a lost hiker pulling into my new driveway. But when I turned around and saw a patrol cruiser with its lights spinning lazily in the afternoon sun, my stomach did something weird. A slow, annoyed somersault. Two officers stepped out like they'd been expecting trouble. The younger one adjusted his belt. The older one looked bored, but his hand still hovered near his holster, not exactly a neighborly welcome. I wiped my hands on my jeans, dusted off the last bits of insulation, and walked over to meet them. "Afternoon, officers. Something I can help you with." The older one spoke first, glancing at a clipboard. "Sir, we received a call from the president of the Silverbrook Estates Homeowners Association. She's filed a report claiming you're unlawfully occupying a residence that falls under their zoning authority and refusing to comply with community development standards." I blinked. What? That was all I managed for a second. This property isn't part of any HOA. I bought it at a federal land auction 2 years ago. Residential agricultural exemption. I've got every piece of paperwork from the county, state, and federal level, if you want it. The younger officer chimed in, flipping through his notes. "She claims your structure violates neighborhood architectural ordinances and that you're refusing to engage in their community rental program." Now it was my turn to laugh. "Wait, hold on. Let me show you something." I jogged back inside my half-unpacked house, grabbing the laminated zoning map I kept near the entryway, because I knew damn well this day would come. People don't like things they don't control. Especially not people like Karen. Back outside, I unfolded the map across the hood of their cruiser. "This right here," I said, pointing to a thick, red outline parcel in the corner of the county grid, "is my land. See this? That's the Silverbrook HOA's northern boundary. A mile and a half south. I'm not in it, near it, or part of it." The older officer studied the map, his brow furrowed. "You got ID. Deed." "Of course," I said, already pulling out the thick folder I'd assembled in anticipation of this exact moment. I handed it to him with the care of someone who's spent thousands of hours designing a home and 0 hours renting it from a Karen. They reviewed the documents for a while. The younger officer mumbled something into his radio, probably verifying with dispatch. Eventually, the older one closed the folder, exhaled through his nose, and gave me a tired look. "Well, you're not technically violating anything we can enforce. Seems like your neighbor has some, strong opinions about land use." "Strong opinions is one way to put it," I muttered. "So I'm free to go back to unpacking?" "For now," the older one said. "But she mentioned escalating this to county compliance and planning. Said she has maps proving your home falls within her community oversight perimeter." I raised an eyebrow. "That's not a real thing." He shrugged. "I don't make the rules. Just letting you know what she said." They got back in the cruiser and pulled away slowly, tires cracking over my gravel like punctuation marks. I stood there for a minute, staring at the disappearing taillights, holding my own damn deed in my hands like a shield. The mountain wind blew dust across my boots. I looked up at the house. All clean lines, solar panels, reclaimed timber siding, and wide glass walls reflecting the ridge behind me. I'd spent 2 years designing this place, 6 months building it with my own hands, and precisely 0 seconds inviting Karen or her minions into any part of it. Now I had to wonder how far she'd go. The next morning started off the way I'd hoped every day would in this new house. Quiet, remote, surrounded by trees and fog creeping lazily across the ridgeline. I brewed coffee, sat on the deck in a folding chair that still had a price tag dangling from the leg, and listened to nothing but wind and birds. For about 20 minutes, it was perfect. Then the mail arrived. There's something deeply unnatural about getting an envelope with your name on it that feels like it's radiating smugness before you even open it. This one was ivory-colored, thick, the kind of pretentious stationery people use when they want you to feel like you're being invited to a wedding, but are actually just being sued. The return address read, Silverbrook Estates HOA, Office of the President. Inside was a multi-page notice with the kind of wording that manages to be both legally threatening and passive-aggressively chipper. It began with, "Dear Mr. Marlowe, we are aware of your recent occupation of the parcel located at Ridgeview Lot 12B and wish to welcome you to the area." How gracious. Then it got weird. However, we must inform you that your current structure is non-compliant with the community-wide architectural framework outlined in the Silver Brook Regional Residency Compact. As such, you are in violation of Article 6, Section B, Independent Housing Placement Outside HOA Boundaries. There is no such compact. I would know. I checked before I ever poured the foundation. Then came the kicker. To resolve this matter amicably, we are prepared to offer you a limited-term rental agreement at one of our available Silverbrook properties, beginning at the modest rate of $7,200 per month, inclusive of community services and aesthetic oversight. They were telling me, formally, that I needed to move out of my own house, pay them rent, and live in one of Karen's properties inside her overpriced little kingdom to avoid escalated measures. Attached was a glossy brochure of homes. Every single one of them looked like they were designed by a committee that considered beige to be daring. And of course, at the bottom of the page was a tiny line. All listed homes are currently managed and leased through DVC Holdings, LLC, managing partner Karen Devereaux. I sat there for a few seconds, stunned. Then I laughed, loud. Then I got angry. Within the hour, I'd scanned the letter and forwarded it to 3 offices. The County Zoning and Land Use Compliance Department, the State Attorney General's Office, Public Integrity Section, and my lawyer, Rachel Briggs, who I called directly. Rachel picked up on the second ring. "You didn't even last 48 hours before HOA drama started. I've got a letter here demanding I vacate my property and rent a house from Karen Devereaux." There was a long pause. Then, "Oh, we're going to have fun with this." She instructed me to file a formal response immediately and to include a cease and desist notice to Silverbrook HOA, citing harassment and attempted coercion. I didn't even have to write it. She already had templates for this kind of nonsense. That afternoon, I drove into town, had the paperwork notarized, and sent it off with a return receipt. I also copied the mayor's office and the county recorder just for good measure. If they were going to play hardball, I was going to build a damn stadium around it. But the cherry on top, that evening, as I walked down to the road to check the camera traps I'd set up at my lower gate, I noticed something new stuck to the pole beside my property line, a laminated sign with HOA branding. "Silverbrook Community Oversight Zone begins here. Unauthorized development subject to review." It wasn't there the day before. The pole didn't even belong to them. It was county infrastructure. I took it down, photographed it, and tossed it in my garage like a trophy. If this was how Karen played when she was trying to be subtle, I could only imagine what came next. It didn't even take a week. I was halfway through installing my interior wall paneling, reclaimed oak, sanded, and sealed myself, when a white pickup truck with the county seal, stenciled on the door, rumbled up my driveway like it had been here 100 times before. 2 men stepped out in steel-toed boots and city-issued vests, clipboards in hand, hard hats tucked under their arms like this was a construction site. One of them had the gait of a man who loved being the center of attention in rooms he didn't belong in. The other looked like he hadn't smiled since the Reagan administration. "Mr. Marlowe?" Clipboard guy asked. "We're here to conduct a zoning compliance and architectural aesthetics inspection." I frowned. I didn't request any inspection. It was initiated via community complaint, verified through procedural submission by a registered residential authority. "HOA?" I asked. The man nodded, not looking up from his clipboard. "Silverbrook Estates." I folded my arms. "They're not my residential authority. They don't have jurisdiction here. They've filed a formal community impact review request." The older man interjected. "Under Municipal Development Protocol 138C. I'd never heard of that. And I knew the zoning codes. I'd been living and breathing them for the last 2 years. "What exactly are you inspecting?" They rattled off a list that sounded like it was made up on the drive over. Excessive verticality, non-conforming sightlines, unapproved external texture treatments, and my personal favorite, failure to maintain aesthetic harmony with adjacent neighborhoods adjacent. I nearly laughed. The nearest Silverbrook property was over a mile away and couldn't see my home even with a drone and a prayer. I kept calm. "I'm going to need to see the complaint in writing. And while we're at it, I'd like to contact the county zoning supervisor before anyone steps a foot on my porch. They exchanged a look, not happy, but they didn't argue. I went inside, called Rick Lomax, a county zoning compliance officer who I'd worked with during the initial planning phase of my build. He was a sharp guy, no nonsense, allergic to HOA politics. Thankfully, he answered right away. "Jason," he said, "why the hell is my team out there?" I was hoping you could tell me. Within 15 minutes, Rick pulled up in his dusty green Jeep Cherokee, stepped out holding a binder thicker than a Bible, and walked past the inspectors like he owned the mountain. He took one look at their forms, frowned, then flipped to a section in his binder and started reading aloud. This parcel, Ridgeview Lot 12B, is classified as residential agricultural exempt under County Code 42F. It is not, nor has it ever been, subject to any private development covenant. All permits are active, all final inspections passed, and aesthetic harmony, he actually smirked, is not a zoning requirement. The older inspector looked like he'd just swallowed a hammer. Rick turned to me. "You want them off your land?" "Yes, please." He nodded. "Gentlemen, you are hereby instructed to vacate this property. If you continue to process unauthorized compliance claims here, I will file an administrative misconduct report with the board." They left, mumbling something about just following the system. I thanked Rick, and he just shook his head. "You're not the first. Silverbrook's been poking into parcels for years, trying to absorb them through attrition, but this is the first time they tried to use fabricated community overlay maps. They're getting bolder, fabricated." He opened his binder again and showed me a printed map, one I'd never seen before, where Silverbrook's boundaries had mysteriously grown to include a large arc of land around the North Ridge. My land. It was marked Proposed Integration Zone. "It's not on file anywhere official," Rick said, "because it's a Photoshop job. Someone tried to sneak this into a municipal proposal packet last month." I stared at it, stunned. "They're trying to annex me." He nodded grimly. "Looks like it. You'll want to file a formal complaint." I'll back it up. Later that evening, I opened Google Maps out of habit while looking up a supply store. I zoomed in on my land, curious. There it was. A label in gray text under my home's pin. Managed by Silverbrook HOA. My jaw tightened. I clicked Report a Problem and flagged it. But I knew how long those things took to fix. Someone at Silverbrook had gone to great lengths to make their lie look official. This was no longer about annoying letters or smug signs. This was full-scale psychological warfare. They wanted to wear me down until I gave in, rented one of Karen's plastic palaces, and let them wrap me in beige regulations. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, though I'll admit, the idea of some HOA president with forged maps trying to quietly annex my land was a new one, but because my brain refused to stop spinning. The more I thought about it, the more one word kept surfacing like a splinter under the skin: extortion. I spent the next morning combing through every document I'd received since buying the property. Letters, zoning approvals, survey maps, the builder's compliance reports, the land auction terms from the Bureau of Land Management. Everything was airtight, which only made their attack all the more absurd. And dangerous. Rachel, my lawyer, called just after breakfast. "Good timing," I said. "I was about to call you." "Karen Devereaux," she said immediately. "That's the HOA president, right?" "Unfortunately, yes." "I've been doing some digging," she continued, the tone in her voice turning from amused to surgical. She's not just a bored housewife with a clipboard. She runs a property management LLC, DVC Holdings. All the homes she wants you to rent, owned by that company. It's her shell. And guess who the second registered agent is? I leaned back in my chair, already feeling my jaw clench. "Let me guess." "Her husband, Gregory Devereaux. Used to be a code enforcement officer, retired last year, still has connections." "Of course he did," Rachel went on. "They've been doing this to people quietly for over a decade. I found 3 past cases where owners of land adjacent to Silverbrook suddenly sold or abandoned their properties after compliance issues made life unbearable. 2 of them were elderly. One of them filed a police report for harassment, complained about signs being posted, utilities mysteriously interrupted, even unmarked county inspections showing up weekly. What happened? She dropped the complaint. Moved out of state, I felt the cold twist in my stomach settle into something harder, rage wrapped in concrete. This wasn't Karen being difficult. This was a business model. Force the outsiders out, take control of the land, expand the HOA footprint, then lease the property under the guise of community compliance. I want to go public, I said. Rachel was silent for a moment. You sure? Dead sure. She sent over a media packet template that afternoon, the kind reporters like. Clean layout, legal citations, key facts highlighted. I spent the rest of the day gathering footage, including the security cam video of the zoning inspectors, photos of the forged boundary maps, the sign I pulled from my gate, and a side-by-side comparison of the real county zoning map next to the Silverbrook Community Overlay Fantasy. And, of course, the Google Maps screenshot falsely labeling my land as HOA managed. Then I recorded the video. I stood out on my porch with the mountains behind me and spoke plainly into the lens. My name is Jason Marlowe. I'm a private homeowner, an architect, and a citizen. I bought this land legally at a federal auction. I've followed every zoning regulation. I've paid every tax. I built this house with my own hands. And now I'm being harassed, coerced, and falsely accused by an HOA I have never belonged to. An HOA that's trying to force me out of my own home so I'll rent one of their homes through a shell company run by their president. They've called the police on me, lied to the county, falsified maps, even tampered with online listings to claim authority they do not have. I'm not going anywhere, and if they can do it to me, they'll do it to others. I posted it at noon. By sundown, it had over 50,000 views. A local Atlanta news station called me before midnight. By the next morning, the story had hit the regional feed of 3 networks. Silverbrook HOA's website mysteriously went offline. But the most satisfying moment came 2 days later when I received a text from Rick, the zoning officer. Guess who just tried to retroactively file a boundary clarification packet at the county clerk's office 3 days too late. We already flagged their maps as fraudulent. He followed up with a photo. Karen standing in front of the county office, wearing oversized sunglasses and trying not to look directly at the camera. Behind her, a man I assumed was Gregory, holding a thick black binder like it was a nuclear football. I zoomed in. The label on the binder said, Zoning Expansion Proposal, Ridgeview. They weren't just targeting me. They were preparing to swallow the ridge. Not anymore. It had been a week since the video went live, and things had been strangely quiet. Not peaceful, just too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a held breath before something stupid happens. I kept busy reinforcing the gate at the end of my driveway, adding solar floodlights and motion sensors along the tree line, and wiring up 2 more trail cams just in case someone decided to get bold. That just-in-case moment came sooner than I expected. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was in town picking up lumber and a few HVAC components when I got a motion alert on my phone from the northeast perimeter camera. Normally, it was just deer or the neighbor's idiot golden retriever who liked to escape his electric fence, but this time, it was a man in a navy jacket walking stiffly with something tucked under his arm. I zoomed in. HOA security. The same guy I'd seen standing at the back of one of the HOA meetings in the background of a Silverbrook promotional video. I didn't know his name, but I knew his face. And more importantly, I knew he had no business being on my land. I watched in real time as he walked around the side of my house, stopped at my front door, pulled a thick envelope from his coat, and jammed it through the mail slot. Then, unbelievably, he pulled out his phone, took a photo of the envelope halfway through the door, as if to document a delivery. He didn't stop there. He stepped back, looked around, then walked over to the big picture window on the west side of the house, the one that opened onto the kitchen. He leaned in, took a few more photos through the glass, then circled around the rear, stepping over the drainage trench I'd just dug. I hit the intercom on my security app and shouted through the exterior speakers, "You've got exactly 5 seconds to get off my property. You're being recorded on 5 cameras and your face is already flagged." He stopped, startled, then turned and briskly walked back the way he came. By the time I got home 20 minutes later, he was gone, but the envelope was still there. Inside was a printed contract, 8 pages bound with a blue ribbon and a fake HOA wax seal, like they were reenacting colonial legal drama. The header read, Voluntary HOA Agreement, Silverbrook Estates. I almost threw it straight into the fireplace until I reached the signature page. My name, in black ink. Next to it, a shaky, poorly forged version of my signature, similar enough that someone who didn't know better might think it was legit, And beside that, witnessed by Gregory Devereaux. It was so laughably clumsy, I almost didn't take it seriously. Almost. But Rachel didn't laugh when I showed her. "This is a felony," she said. "Forgery, falsification of documents, criminal trespass. If they've submitted this anywhere official, they're toast." I filed a report with the sheriff that same afternoon. The deputy took my statement, made copies of the contract, and said he'd escalate it to their criminal investigations unit. When I showed him the footage from the camera, he whistled and muttered, "Amateurs." Then he added, "You realize if they tried to file this as proof of your membership, they've committed fraud in addition to trespass." I nodded. But I wasn't just thinking about charges. I was thinking about strategy. That night, I went through my entire property with a flashlight and thermal scanner. I found 2 more sets of fresh boot prints in the soft dirt near the northern fence line, right where I'd had a small utility box installed 2 weeks earlier. No signs of tampering, but still, they'd crossed the line. So I took it to the next level. I installed a second round of hidden cameras, this time disguised as trail markers and bird boxes. I programmed motion alerts directly to a secure backup server in the cloud, with real-time mirroring to Rachel's law office. And then I sent an anonymous tip with video images and a copy of the forged contract to a local investigative journalist who had already covered HOA abuses in Georgia. Within 48 hours, a short video segment aired on the evening news. Breaking: HOA accused of forging homeowner signature to enforce illegal contract. There was no narration, just the video of the HOA security guy slipping the envelope through my door, the footage of him taking pictures through my window, and a close-up of the forged signature. By Monday morning, I'd received calls from 3 different journalists, 2 civil rights nonprofits, and a real estate law professor who wanted to use my case in a lecture about predatory HOA practices. But the best call, it came from Rachel. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "They filed the fake contract with the county property office. Stamped and everything. It's already in the system." My chest went cold. "That's insane." "It's also perfect," she said, "because now we've got a paper trail, a timestamp, a witness, and security footage of the delivery. This isn't just civil court now, Jason. This is criminal." I looked out of the window, the sunset casting deep gold across the trees. Let them come. I was ready. By Tuesday morning, the forged contract had become the most infamous 8 pages of legal fiction in the state of Georgia. And Karen, she was nowhere to be found. Silverbrook HOA had clammed up. Their phone line led to a voicemail claiming unusual call volume. Their website was still offline, but the county registry still showed my parcel as contractually affiliated with the HOA, thanks to their fraudulent filing. And that meant they were doubling down. That's when I decided to stop playing defense. With Rachel's help, I filed a formal complaint with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under Title VIII, the Fair Housing Act. The complaint focused on coercive practices, predatory housing schemes, falsification of legal documents, and HOA overreach affecting private landowners. We also tagged the Office of the Inspector General for the Bureau of Land Management, since my land had originally been auctioned by the federal government. That detail alone caught immediate attention. Then came the nuclear option. We initiated a federal RICO claim. Rachel had been building the framework quietly ever since we found out about DVC Holdings, the shell company Karen used to funnel the HOA's leasing scheme. Now that we had hard proof of forgery, trespassing, and attempted fraudulent registration of my land under their HOA, she was ready to unleash hell. We filed a civil RICO lawsuit naming Karen Devereaux, Gregory Devereaux, Silverbrook Estates HOA, DVC Holdings LLC, unknown, John Doe's, security personnel, and zoning insiders. The suit alleged a pattern of racketeering activity, wire fraud, mail fraud, forgery, attempted extortion, conspiracy to interfere with housing rights, and abuse of municipal influence. And then, just to make sure it couldn't be swept under the rug, I did something petty. I bought a highway billboard. It sat right on the road between Silverbrook and downtown. Big white letters on black paint. Private land is not for rent. Not for sale, not for HOA, not for Karen. Underneath, a link to a website where I published every piece of documentation, every timeline, every screenshot, and every video. All of it, free to the public. I called it stoptheannex.org. The site exploded. Emails flooded in. Dozens of homeowners across the country shared eerily similar experiences, many involving the same tactics: fake zoning complaints, forced rentals, GPS map tampering, even fraudulent code violations. A national HOA watchdog group reached out offering legal support. One of their attorneys had gone through something nearly identical in Texas. Then came the subpoena. The county zoning office, now under heavy media pressure, issued a formal subpoena for all Silverbrook communications and internal records related to me, my land, and any zoning or complaint activity within a 2-mile radius over the past 6 months. The request included phone logs, emails, internal memos, and meeting minutes. Karen tried to get ahead of it. That afternoon, someone dropped a padded envelope at Rachel's office, unsigned. Inside, a thumb drive. It contained a scanned resignation letter from Karen as HOA president, effective immediately, along with a message claiming the matter was a misunderstanding and offering to withdraw all documents related to Mr. Marlowe in exchange for mutual dismissal of claims. Rachel didn't even blink. She submitted the drive to the FBI. Yes, them. The forged contract, trespassing video, falsified registry update, and now a bribe attempt. This was way past local court drama. This was interstate criminal fraud, wrapped in the faux politeness of suburban HOA culture. I'll never forget the look on the deputy's face when I handed him the printed resignation letter for the evidence file. "She just tried to walk away from this?" he said. I smiled. "Karen doesn't walk. She retreats." The next day, I woke up to a knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a patrol car. It was 2 federal agents. One of them nodded politely and showed his badge. The other one already had a file folder with my name printed on it. "Mr. Marlowe," the lead agent said, "we're with the FBI's Public Integrity Section. We'd like to talk to you about a pattern of misconduct involving local HOAs and municipal officials." I opened the door wide. I've got coffee, documents, and a whole lot of free time. It had begun. The federal agents weren't just visiting for coffee and casual conversation. Within minutes of sitting down, they laid out a timeline of events that mirrored my own, but from the other side. Turns out, my complaint hadn't been the first straw. It had been the final one. Silverbrook Estates was already on the radar for at least 2 other property disputes, both involving forced compliance tactics and misappropriated zoning paperwork. But until now, nothing had stuck. No video, no forged signature, no intruder caught mid-act. I had all 3. The agents asked detailed questions, requested full access to the raw footage, and took copies of everything from the drone flyovers to Rachel's time-stamped affidavits. Before leaving, they handed me a formal witness cooperation agreement. I signed it without hesitation. That same afternoon, it began. I was sitting on my porch when the first squad car rolled up to Silverbrook's front gate. Then another. Then 2 unmarked black SUVs with tinted windows. And finally, a white van bearing the letters FBI, Evidence Recovery Team. I made coffee and watched through binoculars. Agents moved fast. They sealed off the HOA office building. Yes, they had one, complete with glossy promotional brochures and framed renderings of future community projects. They emerged with boxes of files, hard drives, a stack of envelopes with HOA return addresses, and what looked like a whole binder labeled Zoning Committee Liaison. By sunset, Karen was in cuffs. It was almost poetic. She was walked out in a tan pantsuit and sunglasses, flanked by agents, expression frozen somewhere between denial and delusion. As they loaded her into the SUV, she turned her head and locked eyes with one of the neighbors recording on his phone from the sidewalk. That video hit local news before the agents even left the neighborhood. But it didn't end with her. Gregory Devereaux was arrested the next morning at a golf resort an hour south, where he'd apparently booked a stress recovery weekend. 2 other HOA board members were picked up the same day, both tied to forged compliance records and bogus inspection forms. The county zoning liaison suspended pending investigation. The fallout came fast. Silverbrook HOA was frozen. All banking activity, contracts, internal communications locked pending court order. Residents were notified by emergency bulletin that all HOA dues were suspended, meetings were canceled, and no further enforcement actions would be taken until legal review was complete. Some of them panicked, others threw a barbecue. By the end of the week, a class action lawsuit was announced by the residents. Turns out, Karen and her clique had been using HOA funds to finance the rental property scheme, lining their pockets with inflated leasing fees and false maintenance charges. Over a dozen renters had been misled into thinking they were signing legal leases. Some had even paid thousands in deposits for homes technically not zoned for multifamily use. Meanwhile, my land was cleared, officially and publicly. The county registrar released a formal correction to the property records, noting that prior affiliation entries were entered in error and without lawful basis. It came printed on thick cardstock, notarized, and stamped in triplicate. Rachel framed one copy. I laminated the other and bolted it to the gatepost. But the best moment came when a man in a suit knocked on my door holding a box. He introduced himself as a DOJ attorney and handed me a federal notice. I was listed as a material witness and victim in a criminal RICO investigation. In that same box, subpoena copies, a witness stipend form, and something else. A preliminary inventory list of seized items from Silverbrook, HOA HQ. Item number 7. One forged contract bearing the name Jason Marlowe. Status evidence. Item number 24. Digital map overlays submitted to Google Maps for regional update. Flagged for manipulation. Item number 39. Envelope containing handwritten note. Make this go away. We'll give him a house. I laughed out loud. Loud enough that my dog barked in confusion. Silverbrook wasn't just collapsing, it was being excavated, one dirty file at a time. But there was still one last chapter left, something I'd been working on behind the scenes. If Karen and her empire thought they could delete me off the map, well, it was time I returned the favor. Permanently. I stood at the edge of my deck, looking out across the pine ridges, the mist lifting in threads between the trees. A light September wind moved the tall grass below, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I wasn't waiting for a patrol car, a drone, or some clipboard-wielding code enforcer. The only thing on my property that morning was silence. And it belonged to me. The aftermath played out fast. Karen Devereaux pled not guilty at arraignment, but the evidence was too strong, too digital, too time-stamped, too damning. Prosecutors added federal charges: wire fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to defraud, falsification of public records, and attempted coercion under color of law. Gregory flipped within 2 weeks, claimed he had no idea the rental scheme was illegal, then handed over every email he had. One HOA board member cut a deal. The other didn't make it past pretrial motions. The HOA dissolved under court order. Residents were given a choice: vote to rebuild under court-appointed receivership or disband. 82% voted to nuke it from orbit. HOA Silverbrook Estates ceased to exist on paper. The remaining assets were liquidated, rental homes sold off, and every illegally obtained dollar clawed back. As for me, I wasn't finished. The billboard stayed up. I added a new line at the bottom. Now a federal case. Everything documented. Everything public. The website I built, stoptheannex.org, became a hub. In less than a month, it had over 600,000 visits. Local news gave it a segment. Then national news picked it up. They called me the guy who beat the HOA and lived to tell the tale. I didn't care for the nickname, but I leaned into it. I was invited to speak at homeowner rights forums, zoning board meetings, and even a legal seminar on property boundaries and fraudulent filings. Rachel and I launched a nonprofit, Freehold Defense League. We gave homeowners tools to fight back: document templates, county-level maps, video tutorials on zoning law, and step-by-step guides for resisting forced annexation and HOA intimidation. And the house, the one they tried to erase, it became something more than just my home. People started visiting, not out of curiosity but out of respect. Veterans, retirees, young families building off-grid cabins. One guy drove up from Florida just to shake my hand. Another brought his son. Said, I wanted him to see what standing your ground really looks like. So I put up one last sign, just below the laminated land certificate on my gatepost. Private land, not for rent, not for sale, not for Karen. Permanently outside all HOA jurisdiction. Every time I look at it, I remember the morning Karen sent the cops to my door because I dared to live freely, legally, and without her permission. I remember the forged contract, the trespassing, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the sheer audacity. And then I remember the knock on the door from the FBI. You don't beat these people by playing their game. You beat them by documenting everything, standing your ground, and building something they can't touch. Something real. Because at the end of the day, property lines aren't just marks on a map. They're boundaries. And mine? Mine were burned into stone.